Lamar Jackson broke his silence on the toxicity of the MVP race, and the Ravens and Texans make a rare wide receiver post-deadline swap. We talk about that and so much more coming up on a Crossover Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. That includes a video form on YouTube where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. Same show, both audio and video. We bring you Ravens news, analysis, updates, and so much more 5 days per week. Plus, we bring you bonus episodes. We go live after every single Ravens game and every piece of Ravens big news. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, be sure to keep it locked in here on Locked On Ravens. Today's Crossover Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Weird week schedule-wise. I mean, man, the Ravens, they played on Saturday. They're playing again tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve today, so happy Christmas Eve to everybody. And, of course, we're heading into Christmas tomorrow where the Ravens will be playing the Houston Texans. So we'll be talking with John Hickman of Locked On Texans about biggest matchups, key storylines, predictions for that Ravens and Texans game and how those two teams match up. But before we do that, wanted to spend a few minutes talking about Lamar Jackson breaking his silence about the toxicity of the MVP race, how he feels about it. There were some narratives that were spun yesterday about Lamar and Josh Allen. They're trying to pit Derrick Henry against Lamar again. It's a whole cycle. We already did the whole Lamar, Derrick Henry being pitted against each other thing. It's honestly old. For those that don't know about that, it's where essentially people are saying, oh, Derrick Henry's the best player on the team. Lamar gets propped up by Derrick Henry. No, can we just give Lamar credit? Like, is that something we can do? So Lamar was asked about the MVP race, and he said, if I do happen to, it happens, that would be dope to win it 3 times, but I'm not really focused on that. That's never been my goal. Even the first and second one, I always want to finish with a championship, but I've been falling short. I still feel like the MVP is a team thing because my teammates helped me get that award, but I'm not the one catching the passes, blocking. I'm trying to win a championship. That's my goal since I was a little kid. But MVP in the National Football League, that's dope. That's dope. So essentially, Lamar's saying, hey, MVP, that's really cool. Like, it's a cool thing to happen, but that's not what he's focused on. He's focused on winning a championship, which we know Lamar's super competitive. And I personally love that from Lamar. And I know that he would trade his MVPs for a Super Bowl ring. I mean, you can tell how competitive he is. You can tell how much he wants to win a championship. So I'm glad that he said, hey, look, it's not my goal, but it's a really cool thing. And I wasn't expecting him to, I was more so expecting him to say, yeah, I would, I want the Super Bowl. I want a championship. But the fact that he acknowledged, like, hey, man, this is really cool. I'm not saying he didn't ever think that, but I thought it's awesome that he said that. And then he was asked about if he heard all the conversation between him and Josh Allen about, oh, who's going to win. And Lamar said, I have no choice but to hear it. They tag me in it. You don't have to tag me. You can talk about it all you want, but you want to tag me for clickbait. Sometimes I'm going to say something back like, that was stupid. I really don't care about the talk, though. I'm trying to win. Lamar, he's so locked in. And we talked about this on yesterday's show as well. He is so locked in on this whole situation. He wants to win. He wants to be perfect. He wants to give his team the best shot to win. And so he's focused on improving on the mistakes, getting better each and every week. And if he wins the MVP, sure. Essentially, I feel like that's Lamar's mindset. That's what he's kind of putting off here is, look, if I win the award, that's cool. It's an awesome thing. It's an honor. And he brought up the fact that it is a team award in his eyes, which I think is also cool in its own right. And the Ravens and Texans also made a wide receiver swap. By the way, D'Amico Ryans, Houston Texans head coach, said that Lamar was his MVP too. So another endorsement. You got to love that. But Ravens and Texans make essentially a post-deadline trade with Deontay Johnson and Steven Sims. Deontay Johnson gets claimed by Houston. And then you have Steven Sims going to the Ravens. Steven Sims, a punt return option, actually had a punt return touchdown against Baltimore the divisional round last year. So, man, you got a lot of moving parts here. a lot of craziness, a lot of holiday craziness, and we're going to talk about all that with John Hickman now of Locked On Texans. We'll get a little bit more into the conversation of Deontay Johnson, Steven Sims, also about Lamar and the MVP. Let's talk about it all with John now. 3 games, 11 days. I mean, that's not easy for anybody.
It's tough.
Houston and Baltimore both dealing with injuries, although I know, John, for Houston, the situation injury-wise is a lot worse than what Baltimore's dealing with.
Which makes playing 4 days later after Saturday even more frustrating. You know, this team was beat up a lot Saturday against the Kansas City Chiefs. Lost the starting receiver Tank Dell, loses Shaq Mason, loses Jimmy Ward. Jalen Petry's already out. This team has been beat up, and for the most part, also Aziz is out due to suspension. So this team has been beat up a lot this year, and for the most part, they've been able to overcome it. But I just don't see how they'll be able to overcome it Wednesday after losing the players who they lost. And I think the biggest, of course, we'll talk about it in the key storylines, but the biggest player that they lost is Tank Dell. There's nobody on this roster right now on a struggling offense. Excuse me. On a struggling offense that can replicate what Tank Dell can do. No one man. You may get a couple of guys to pitch in and be able to contribute the same, but there's no one man on this offense from what we've been able to see be able to replicate what Tank Dell has been able to do. The only player that I can think of with the opportunity that he should be able to get now is John Mechie. But he was out Saturday. Full go on Monday. So hopefully Houston will get their things together. John Mechie is, for whatever reason, healthy now. I was kind of shocked he missed Saturday's game, but hopefully he'll be able to go out there and contribute for the Houston Texans offense. But right now, the biggest matchup, when we look at both teams coming off a turnaround, it has to be the offense versus the defense. I mean, this is a banged up offense right now. And Baltimore, stop me if I'm wrong, Baltimore has been able to kind of string it together a little bit as of late, especially with a secondary that started off this year struggling, and now they've come along a little bit more. So, what's up with the defense, and would that be the biggest matchup for the Houston Texans? Should we be worried?
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore's defense has been really good over the course of the last month or so, and started with a closed door open forum meeting after the Ravens beat the Bengals, and they were giving up touchdown after touchdown to Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. And really ever since then, they've gotten their act together. The pass defense has been great. They made some tough decisions, like benching their $70 million man and Marcus Williams in favor of Ardarius Washington, who made one of the plays of the game for the Ravens against Pittsburgh on Saturday. It's just a matter of guys wanting to play, and that's kind of what Marlon Humphrey was talking about a couple of weeks ago when he was asked about the defensive turnaround. He said, look, in that meeting, we talked about how the message was, if you want to play and you want to contribute, you're going to be out on that field. If you don't, we have a spot for you on the bench. And that is what this Ravens defense has done. They've moved Kyle Hamilton back into a more traditional safety role on the back end, not having him up towards the line as much. That has helped Baltimore's defense. And with guys like Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins, their rookie corner, who's playing really well, and obviously Hamilton and Ardarius Washington, you look at Houston, who no longer has Stephon Diggs. Now they're down Tank Dell as well. That's tough. Nico Collins is a stud. Like he's incredible, one of the best wide receivers in this league, but he can't do it by himself. And obviously we'll get into the wide receiver swap, essentially the Ravens and the Texans had on Monday with Deontay Johnson. But I think, to me, this defense has been one of the biggest storylines for the Ravens just because of the turnaround. The run defense was always good. They're the top rush defense in the league. The guys on the defensive line have been great. Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, and Afe Owe, Kyle Van Noy's a double-digit sack man after coming off his couch last year for Baltimore. They're getting contributions from a lot of guys. But on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's interesting for Baltimore too, John, because what you have is an MVP type player in Lamar Jackson, right, who was in that conversation, and DeMeco Ryans, obviously head coach of the Houston Texans,
gave him some love.
Really nice things to say. Yeah, nice things to say. And obviously the discourse has been very toxic. Lamar actually broke his silence about the toxicity of the MVP conversation between him and Josh Allen. But DeMeco, again, he propped Lamar Jackson up. He said he definitely jumps off the tape as the best player I've seen this year. Talk about MVP. He's definitely the MVP in my mind. And Lamar's been great. 40 total touchdowns. He's broken his single season passing record. He's shown his decision-making has gone up even more than we saw last season. This is the best Lamar that we have ever seen. And after 2023, we were wondering, when was that conversation going to be had again? We didn't even have to wait a year to have that. So for Lamar, he has a great cast of weapons around him. Obviously, bringing in Derrick Henry has really helped this offense. I think the narrative people are running with now is that, oh, Derrick Henry is the best player on this offense and he makes Lamar better. It's the other way around. Like, Henry's awesome. Hall of Fame, future Hall of Fame. I know he's had some moments against that Houston defense, and I'm sure a lot of Texans fans will like to forget. But to me, it's like, look, both players are awesome, and people are saying, "Oh, you take Lamar off the Ravens, and the Ravens are still an 8-win team with Derrick Henry." And I'm just like, look, Derrick Henry's sick. He's an amazing player. Lamar makes that offense go. We've seen it this season, and I think, to me, Lamar's evolution has been an incredible part of how the Ravens have been so successful this year.
Absolutely. I think they complement each other so great. So well. They complement each other so well. And the arrival of Derrick Henry, I mean, you really have to account for him still. I mean, he's had games this year where you can make a case, hey, if Derrick Henry isn't as hot as he is running the ball, this is a different Baltimore offense. But the thing about Lamar is Lamar has never had a true number one receiver. This year, Zay Flowers has done a very good job of being that team's number one receiver for Baltimore. But when I look at Derrick Henry and his arrival, I think him being so great at what he does opens up opportunities for a speedy receiver in Zay Flowers. Because a lot of times teams still, when you look at the hierarchy on that offense, where does Zay Flowers rank? At least coming into the season, at least for the most part of this season. Maybe now he may be a little bit higher, but you have to account for Lamar, whether that's him running the ball or throwing the ball. Now with Derrick Henry, those guys are 1-1-8. Traditionally with this offense, it's been the tight ends, and so Zay Flowers being the third, fourth, fifth option, he's done a very good job in his role. And I do think Houston will have a tough matchup against that offense. They have Danielle Hunter here in Houston, Will Anderson here in Houston. So those two guys have played great on the edge, double-digit sack guys together. They both missed. Will Anderson has missed some time. So the running aspect of Lamar, I'm not necessarily as worried about. I know he's going to break off a couple here and there, but he's gotten so much better as a passer. And also now considering no Jimmy Ward for the Houston Texans, no Jalen Petrie for the Houston Texans, no Aziz for the Houston Texans, stud rookie cornerback, Kamari Lassiter, he's not going to have to play that nickel, which leaves a Jeff Okudah, who I don't even think has played in 80 snaps this year for Houston Texans. Don't think he's played in over 100 snaps this year. He's rusty, and he is not the greatest option for outside corner right now. And so I think Rashad Bateman, who, by the way, has been playing some good football for that offense, I think that's where the disadvantage is. Am I necessarily worried about the Texas defensive front not having a good game? No, I think that they'll have a good game. Tim Settle is also a guy I think Ravens fans need to look out for. Olu Fadakazi is up and down with his injury. We don't know if he's going to play. I think he was a DNP Monday. But it's Lamar attacking defenses vertically hasn't been a conversation that has been consistent throughout his career. This is one of those years where career highs and almost everything, you have to be worried about that. And with a banged-up secondary, this is an opportunity for the Ravens to really attack this team and hurt the Houston Texans downfield.
Yeah, and I think Baltimore probably will try to push the ball down the field, but Lamar, he'll try to take some stuff that is given to him. And there's been some conversation here in Baltimore about Lamar over the course of the year, maybe not taking open rushing lanes when they're provided to him, instead letting routes develop instead. After the Ravens game against Philadelphia, Lamar Jackson told reporters that his mom cussed him out for not taking those rushing lanes, and Lamar Jackson is 2-0. The Ravens are 2-0 since his mom cussed him out. Sometimes that's what you need, a little love and a little. You get an opportunity, I think, to kind of reset during the bye week, and I think that's exactly what Baltimore did, and I think we're seeing an even different Lamar Jackson here. I expect that to happen against the Texans as well. But coming up in the second part of the show, we talked about the Ravens. We will flip the field, talk about the Texans a little more and how the Ravens and Texans match up. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot to get into on this crossover Thursday on Tuesday of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Man, FanDuel has so many great things going on over there. The NFL playoffs, they're almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And you have so many ways on FanDuel to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It really is thrilling. And not only can you bet on who will actually win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. Locked On Ravens, Locked On Texans. It's Kevin Oestreicher and it's John Hickman talking with you about a Christmas Day matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans.
Can it be a Christmas Day miracle? Can the Houston Texans? I think they've done enough for the Houston Texans to be considered to get off of Santa's naughty list. I mean, they've been banged up and hit from every which way in terms of losing players. And so hopefully Santa can come through for him, because if he's checking their list twice, please see the Houston Texans and give them a gift of a win this Wednesday.
Man, well, right now the Ravens are 5.5-point favorites over on FanDuel, our friends over at FanDuel. So, could be a blowout, could be a close game. We don't know how it's going to go. But, John, I think one of the bigger storylines, and I'm really intrigued to kind of hear where you are about the Texans offense right now at this point in the year, because CJ Stroud, I know a lot of expectations for him coming into the year after his phenomenal rookie season. The Texans, they bring in Stephon Diggs to pair with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Of course, that receiver room has fallen apart due to injury, but I know there's been a lot of conversation about CJ this season and his performance. They bring in Joe Mixon, who for the most part has been incredible, is a new addition to that offense. But in your mind, for Houston and the biggest storyline on the offensive side of the ball, is it CJ Stroud, or is it more so how depleted this wide receiver room has become?
Depends on if we're talking about for the season. But we're doing a crossover right now, so I know you're talking about the Wednesday matchup. It's 100% the wide receiver room. No Diggs. They knew that going into Saturday. They leave Saturday in speedy recovery to Tank Dell, losing Tank Dell, dislocated knee, torn ACL, all on one play. Now you're looking at a Houston Texan team that I think has been desperate for a couple of weeks, and a lot of times they've been able to pull through their desperation and get a win. This team, they've been resilient all year, if you look at the amount of losses. Nico Collins was out for 5 games, and they have to survive through that. The issue is now you're going through the period of the schedule. You've already solidified your playoff spot. Now you're going to have to bounce back and work with what you have going into the playoffs. And Tank Dell is a player, again, like I said, I don't know if there is a player that can replicate what Tank Dell has been able to be for this Houston Texan offense. More so because in CJ, we saw the crying on national TV, and I don't have no problem with that. That's his boy. Said that's a brother, best friend. Those two chemistry is better than any other receiver that's available for the Houston Texans, not named Nico Collins. And so the biggest storyline right now for Houston is the depleted wide receiver room. And I don't think it'll be this Wednesday against his former team whenever Deontay Johnson does play, who Houston claimed on waivers. What will he be able to do for this offense? I don't think he'll play Wednesday. Too fast of a turnaround. I think we'll see him against the Tennessee Titans right before the Houston Texans gear up for the playoffs. But this depleted wide receiver room is something that I don't think that they'll be able to overcome. Also, considering Dalton Schultz and that tight end room has been, for the most part, lackluster, close to abysmal.
I think the other big part of this, speaking of wide receivers, you mentioned Deontay Johnson. I think that's a huge storyline, is these two teams face off in just 24 hours
now. What can he tell us about you guys?
Yeah.
Can he
I
play
was gonna
inside,
say,
man?
well, based off of his time in Baltimore, and I'll tell you, it's good luck. And the reason I say that is because Deontay really didn't do much of anything in Baltimore. I think Jeremy Fowler, honestly, John, put it best. He lit millions in flames during his tenure with the Ravens. He had one catch for 5 yards on 5 targets. It was a problem where, he comes in, he says all the right things, and he's like, look, I'll play any role. I'm ready to go to work. Let's do this. But then all this stuff comes out about him and being distraught after wins because of his role, and him obviously refusing to go in the game against Philadelphia was the big breaking point in this situation. And look, John, I don't have a problem with a guy being upset about how they're being used or a problem about their role, or, they have an issue with how their team is utilizing them. That's fine to me. I don't think the Ravens utilized him great, if we're being honest. But when you refuse to go in the game, you essentially quit on your team. That it's a whole different situation. That's never okay, regardless of most any situation. And I think with the Devondre Campbell situation happening in San Francisco, just a few days after that, and the response to that, I honestly feel like Baltimore might have tried to keep him if the Devondre Campbell situation didn't happen, because there's a reality, John, now that Deontay Johnson is on the Texans. If the Ravens falter and they fall to a wild card spot, I have them winning the division, the AFC North right now. If the Ravens playoff start is today, these two teams will be facing off in round 1.
Right.
And so Deontay Johnson has the potential to face off against his former team. The Ravens, they understood that was probably a risk. Talent-wise, on field, I think he's a good player. He can separate very well, one of the best separators in the league. I think he can give you a lot if the other aspect off the field doesn't hinder it. But he's had issues in Pittsburgh. He had issues in Carolina, which was one of the reasons why he was traded for Soto, is because Carolina wanted him off the roster. Baltimore brought him in thinking that things could maybe change, and Baltimore's locker room culture is really strong, but it didn't work. So if Houston can find a way to turn that around, I think he's a great player on the field. But it's just a matter of how it happens.
I do want to say this briefly. I was really shocked in the sense that Houston signed him. This is a locker room that don't play that. They no nonsense. If you don't want to, if you don't want to go on the field, this ain't the locker room. And I think all 32 teams in the NFL are like this. But obviously, when you look at a playoff team, this ain't the locker room to do that. So I was kind of shocked a little bit. But that shows you how much of a desperation mode this team is in right now. But I'll say this, for the Houston Texans that traded the number 23 overall pick, traded back, eventually took Kamari Lassiter, and they ended up signing Stephon Diggs. The number 23 overall pick ended up being Brian Thomas Jr. Boy, would the Houston Texans love to have him right now. So I say that to say this. Both the Texans and Johnson are in a very good spot right now, because I think this is an opportunity for both sides to figure out, is this a player we should even consider bringing back for training camp next year to make sure that we have a full wide receiver room? And for Deontay Johnson, I need to show one of 32 teams that I can still play football and play it at a high level. So I think this is a win-win situation for both sides. And hopefully it ends up being a major win for the Houston Texans, to where, hey, you know what, Johnson, you gave us a little bit, you got a little juice left. At the very least, we're going to give you a 1-year deal. We want to bring you back for training camp. Low risk, high reward. Come on in, come on back. And that's why I think it's important that Houston brought him in. The playoffs, I don't really think it's going to matter too much. I think this is a one-and-done team. But you got to figure out what you have on your roster now for next year.
Yeah, and sometimes that is what it is. The need was apparent for Houston. They are desperate for a wide receiver. It's now come out that one other team placed a claim for Deontay Johnson. The Texans got him. It was the Los Angeles Chargers. They were the only other team to put in a claim for Deontay. So the Texans get him. The Chargers don't. But this was a wide receiver swap, John, because not only did Deontay Johnson go to the Houston Texans, Steven Sims Jr. went to the Ravens on waivers. So it's kind of like a trade, right? The Ravens, they acquire Steven Sims.
A lot in common right now with these two teams.
Yeah, they acquired Deontay Johnson. So from a Ravens perspective, what can you tell Baltimore about Steven Sims, who obviously had a big play against Baltimore in the divisional round last year?
Yeah, good return, man. That's it. Just a good return, man. You look at your wide receiver room right now. Zay Flowers, Rashard Bateman, I think Wallace has been.
Yeah, they got Nelson Aguilar in there.
Nelson Aguilar. So if Nelson Aguilar is your third receiver, Steven Sims would be your fifth in terms of receiver wise. But he's a good special teamer and he's a good return man. There's nothing more, nothing less. I don't have anything else for you. I'm sorry.
Wait, no, it's fine because with the Ravens, they've had some returner issues this season. They've tried Tylan Wallace out, hasn't really worked as well as they've thought. They brought in Desmond King, who obviously Texans fans are very familiar with, and he had 2 fumbles in that Pittsburgh game. Now, luckily, Baltimore was able to get them both back, but John Harbaugh did say that he's going to be the return guy moving forward. But having Steven Sims is probably just an insurance option. If Desmond King doesn't work out, you can bring in Steven Sims and have him return, and that will be that. So you get Deontay Johnson out in Houston. Steven Sims comes to Baltimore. Little post-deadline swap for both of these teams. And coming up, we'll be talking about some keys to victory for both sides, talking about what the Texans need to do if they want to beat the Ravens, and what the Ravens need to do if they want to beat the Texans. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can out up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks means you to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. So this week, I'm looking at Jared Goff, more than 230 passing yards. Saquon Barkley for more than 1 touchdown. It's quick, simple, and so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. And this show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Now, Rocket Money, maybe they've helped you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice. That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bill so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Now, for me, one of the best features is a subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't even using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Locked On Texans. This is a Christmas Eve crossover for a Christmas Day matchup between the Ravens and the Texans. Of course, want to thank everybody for making both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. And remind you that this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. John, let's move into some keys to victory for both of these teams here. I think that there are ways that both teams could pull this one out, ways that they can lose this game. I'll start on the Ravens side of things as they are traveling to Houston. This is actually, for those that don't know, the second straight year Baltimore is traveling. They are playing away on Christmas Day. The Ravens did it last year against San Francisco. That game went pretty well for them, and Lamar Jackson wrapped up the MVP there. Lamar has a chance to wrap up the MVP in Houston against the Texans this time around. But number one, I think Baltimore has to continue their strong play from Pittsburgh, particularly in the penalty department. The Ravens going into their game against Pittsburgh, John, they were ranked last in nearly every statistical major penalty category there was. Like every single one. Penalties against, you had yards, net penalties. It was bad. The Ravens against Pittsburgh, just 2 penalties for 10 yards. That is the type of football you need to play. Mistake-free, or at least as close to it as you can get football, because there have been too many times this season where the Ravens will have a nice 8-yard run from Derrick Henry on first down. And then all of a sudden, there's Holden, Ronnie Stanley, 10 yards, a 2nd and 2 turns into a 1st and 20, and that just derails drives. So getting out of your own way if you're the Ravens. Don't let Houston make this game all sloppy and try to make it their way. Get ahead and do your thing while also making sure that you're not getting in your own way while doing that. Second part of this, I would definitely say put pressure on CJ Stroud, and for the Texans offensive line, which has dealt with injuries, is still dealing with injuries and hasn't performed up to most expectations this season. Guys like Travis Jones, Nnamdi Madubuike, Odafe Owe. I think if those guys can put pressure on CJ Stroud, turn up that internal clock, any quarterback, I don't care how good you are, any quarterback that has that clock sped up, certainly CJ can make plays when that happens. I'm not saying he can't, but you don't want CJ just sitting back there in the pocket for 4 or 5 seconds, going through his reads and not feeling any heat. You got to turn up the pressure on CJ. I'd expect Baltimore to maybe use Roquan Smith up at the line. Maybe they'll flirt with Kyle Hamilton up there. They like using Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins on those corner blitzes. I think that's a big way for Baltimore to win this game. And finally, my third key to victory for Baltimore is I just think getting the tight ends involved. And Mark Andrews has been awesome. Isaiah Likely has been awesome. The Texans got back Christian Harris, who's a heck of a linebacker, absolute stud of a player. But I feel like the Texans are going to miss Jalen Petrie in this game. This is a guy that you would be, okay, this is your tight end stopper. Go out there, versatile player, can play all over the field. I feel like they're going to miss him. Use the short passing game too. You got Will Anderson, you got Daniil Hunter, you got a good defensive line. If they're getting pressure on you, the best way to combat, even if the Texans want to blitz Lamar, it's about getting the ball out quickly. So I feel like that's, for me, keys to victory for Baltimore. What about you, John? What are some keys to victory for the Texans?
I'm actually going to steal one of yours. And we know Tank Dell is down, struggling offense. Houston extended Dalton Schultz in the offseason. He's been a disappointment so far to this part of the season. Not nearly the season he had last year, but, we talk about the wide receiver room and that depth chart in that area of the team being banged up. The fact is, Dalton Schultz, your $11 million a year man, has to be able to produce for this offense. There's no way around it. CJ needs him. It's been frustrating a lot this year with Dalton Schultz, and I'm going to be fair to him. You didn't pay him $11 million to block as much as he has. Dalton has routinely on tape shown a lackadaisical effort on the field, and it's been frustrating to watch. So he needs to get involved. Nobody talks about Brevin Jordan and his injury and how much that has impacted this offense in a lot of different ways. When you lose a Swiss Army knife that can do different things, it hurts an offense. And Dalton Schultz, he needs to step up. Irv Smith has played some good football for the Houston Texans in his limited role. Number 2, I'm going to read off some numbers to you. 28, 35, 41, 30, 41, 35, 30, 35, 34. You want to know what that is? Points the Ravens have scored in their wins.
Yeah.
The Houston Texans cannot afford for this game to get away from them fast. They don't have the offense to keep up. Time and time again, we've seen and they've shown us to not be able to, 5 or 6 weeks in a row, no second half points, no second half touchdown. They cannot keep up with this offense. If this game gets out of hand early, then I think it'll be a blowout. Don't want to put a score prediction on it, but if Baltimore leaves out their first quarter and the game is 13-0, 14-0, or something along those lines, it's going to be a blowout. It's going to be an ugly Christmas day. Will not be a Christmas miracle. So they got to make sure that they're able to get off the field when they can get off the field. Not necessarily sure how good of a team Baltimore is on third downs right now, but whenever Houston can create that pressure or get them to play a little bit behind the sticks or on long downs to convert, get off the field. And lastly, I think this is for both teams, Kevin. Do not get caught up in Beyonce.
Hey, I'm with that. And if you heard what Lamar said on Monday, he said he's going to be watching. He said, sorry, John Harbaugh, I'm watching. I'm with you, though. I'm with you on that.
No, don't get caught up, man. But I mean, it's what I want to say.
Do you remember Evan McPherson at the halftime show with Cincinnati? He watched the halftime show from the field. The Bengals lost the Super Bowl, and he got all types of hate for it. Like,
Don't get caught up in Beyonce. No, seriously. That's my 3 keys to victory. But Houston got to go out there and put it all together. I am worried about the secondary. I really am. And I'm really worried about Bateman having a big day for you guys. He's averaging 19, 18 yards per catch. Man. He's been the downfield target whenever Lamar needs to stretch the field. Houston has Derek Stingley, who I think they need to put on him, and Kalen Bullock, who I think right now should be in serious consideration for defensive rookie of the year. But I'm a little bit worried about Bateman.
John is awesome, and I really appreciate him providing some great Texans insight as these two teams get prepared to face off on Christmas Day. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens, though. Thank you so much for tuning in. On the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. Tell a friend, tell a family member that we are also here for them on Locked On Ravens. And, of course, we are here for you on Locked On Ravens with 5 days a week of Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow on Christmas, we will be back, so be sure to stay tuned. We'll have a game preview of the Ravens and Texans matchup, so be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.